For months, I'd eat a normal lunch and feel wrecked by 3 o'clock. Foggy, flat, hunting for something sweet. I thought it was just me. So I started tracking it properly. Every meal, every crash, the lot. And what came back wasn't random at all. I'm Neil, I've got 13 years of NHS blood tests behind me, and I track this stuff for real. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll show you the pattern one ordinary meal set off, and why your afternoon slump probably isn't about willpower at all. 3 things. 1, the meal I ate and what my numbers did overnight. 2, the 6 days it then took my body to get back to normal. 6, I've tracked that exact pattern 3 separate times now. And 3, the small change that softened it. So let's start with that meal. The afternoon it all went sideways. Saturday evening, October 25, nothing dramatic, cake, chocolate, wine, kind of things you'd call a normal night. I wasn't off the rails, I wasn't binging, I was just having a Saturday. Sunday morning, I woke up freezing. Not ill, not hungover exactly, just cold from the inside out, which anyone who's ever had their metabolic state disrupted will recognise immediately. That bone-deep chill when your body's scrambling to find stable fuel. Irritable, hungry, genuinely proper hungry before I'd had anything. And then I thought, here we go, again. Because by that point I tracked this exact shape twice before. One-off planned meal, sugar, alcohol or both, and the same sequence plays out every time. Sleep disrupted, days 1 and 2. Then a kind of low-grade fog, days 3 through 5. Not ill enough to stop anything, just off. The kind of off where you're sitting in a meeting thinking about food when you weren't hungry 20 minutes ago. The kind of off where writing something simple might take 3 attempts. Then day 6, normal again, like it never happened. What I couldn't work out, and this is what bothered me for a long time, was whether I was imagining the pattern or whether I was actually measuring it. Because it sounds a bit much, doesn't it? 1 meal, 6 days. That's not how people talk about this stuff. People talk about a sugar crash. They mean an hour, maybe 2. They don't mean most of a week. October 2025, that's the 3rd tracked instance of this pattern. Before I get into the numbers, a word on how I track. I use GKI, glucose ketone index. It's a ratio, your fasting glucose divided by your fasting ketones. Lower is generally better when you're adapted to running on fat. When I'm in a settled rhythm, my GKI sits somewhere between 5 and 8 on a normal day. Below 3 puts you in what some researchers call therapeutic range. Above 10 means glucose is dominating. Saturday evening, GKI sitting at 6.7, stable, settled. Sunday morning after cake and wine, 13.2. That's not a bad number by any clinical standard. I want to be clear about that. 13.2 GKI isn't dangerous. A GP looking at my fasting glucose that morning would have seen nothing alarming. But for me, coming from 6.7, it was nearly double. And I felt it. That wasn't me imagining things. Day 1, Sunday, freezing all day. Hunger dysregulated. Not the clean hunger I'd been used to where you notice you're hungry and it's fine to wait. This was edgy hunger. The kind that makes you reach for something just to make it stop. Sleep that night, disrupted. Woke twice. Odd dreams, day 2. Monday. Brain fog through the working day. Not thick, not debilitating, just the difference between thinking at full speed and thinking at 3/4 speed. Anyone who works at a desk knows the feeling. You're there, you're functioning, but the edges are soft. I've got it logged. Energy 6.5 out of 10. Mood, fine. Actually, mood held up better than I'd expected. But cognitively, I was running on reserve. Day 3 through 5, same pattern. Low-grade hunger arriving at odd times, not tied to meals. Sleep, gradually settling, but not there yet. GKI slowly climbing back towards normal. 11.4, 10.2, 8.8, not in a straight line, a couple of wobbles. Day 6, Thursday morning, GKI 6.9, back to baseline. 6 days, 1 meal, and this wasn't the first time. The first tracked instance was earlier in the 70-day reset. Same shape, single sugar event, sleep disruption days 1 and 2. Fog and hunger, days 3 through 5. Baseline day 6. Second instance. Same. 3rd instance, October 25. Identical. 3 separate events, 3 identical recovery curves. That's when it stopped being a feeling and became a pattern. Now, what's actually happening here, because the pattern is real and the mechanism isn't that complicated once you see it. Think of it like a roller coaster. A high sugar meal sends glucose up fast, and what goes up fast comes down fast. That drop, typically 2 to 4 hours after the peak, is what most people feel as the mid-afternoon slump. The desperate need for something sweet. The flat, foggy feeling that people blame on tiredness or stress or not sleeping well enough. They rarely trace it back to what they ate 2 hours earlier. But what I was tracking wasn't just the 2-hour crash, it was the 6-day tail. And that tail, the fog, the disrupted sleep, the hunger arriving at odd hours, that's a different thing. That's what happens when a single spike doesn't just cause a dip, it knocks the whole system out of rhythm for days. The sleep disruption on night 1 means cortisol runs higher on day 2. Cortisol run higher means hunger signals get noisy. Your body starts looking for quick energy because it thinks you're under threat. Noisy hunger means your eating becomes less settled, which means glucose is less stable the next day, and on it goes. Not a spike and a crash, a cascade. Each day slightly less disrupted than the one before, until by day 6 the system has had enough time to recalibrate. 3 times, same cascade, 6 days each time. If you're at the stage where you're asking questions before things get serious, this is what this channel is for. Real data, real GP conversations, properly documented, not a bloke shouting about superfoods. Subscribe if that sounds more useful. The penny dropped on a morning walk, probably about 6 weeks into the 70-day reset. Wasn't thinking about blood sugar, I was half listening to a podcast. Something completely unrelated actually, and my mind wandered off on a tangent the way it does. And suddenly I was thinking, it's always 6 days, not 5, not 7, 6. Every single time I'd noted individual events before, but I hadn't put the number to it properly until that morning. When I got back and pulled up the logs, there it was. 3 instances, 3 recovery curves, all landing on day 6. That kind of pattern you can't see in a single event. You need the repetition, which is partly why I track obsessively and partly why 13 years of NHS records is useful. Not because any single data point tells you much, but because patterns across time start to mean something. Dr. Sarah Berry, nutrition scientist at King's College London, one of the researchers behind the Zoe study, put the mechanism clearly. About 2 to 4 hours after a significant blood sugar peak, she said you get a dip. And their Zoe research found that dip can drive increased hunger, increased food intake, poor energy, poor alertness. She called the state of having multiple snacks and peaks throughout the day a kind of metabolic chaos, which I thought was a useful phrase actually, not dramatic, just accurate. What I tracked was a bigger version of the same thing. One major peak, a prolonged dip, a cascade of downstream effects across 6 days in my case. And this is N equals 1. One bloke, 13 years of blood tests. The pattern seems to involve sleep as the critical amplifier. The sugar event disrupts sleep on night 1. This disrupted sleep then keeps hunger signals dysregulated for the next few days. It's not the sugar doing all 6 days of damage, it's the sugar kicking off a sequence that the disrupted sleep then extends. I can't say this would play out the same way for everyone. What I can say is that 3 times, same meal, same recovery curve. It's not random. My GP's view, when I brought this to him after the 3rd tracked instance, was measured. Interesting pattern. Not alarmed, he said the GKI numbers weren't clinically concerning, but that the consistency of the recovery timeline was worth noting. That's about as enthusiastic as he gets. I'll take it. If I was starting this tracking journey again, I'd start looking at what I ate 2 hours before any energy crash. Not the morning, not the night before. The roller coaster always has a trigger meal. I spent a long time blaming bad sleep, or stress, or not drinking enough water. Rarely did I trace the crash back to what I ate 2 hours earlier. That's the first thing I'd change. I'd also track across events, rather than within them. The pattern I found wasn't visible in any single instance. It only showed up when I put the 3 instances side by side and looked at the shape of each recovery curve. One event looks like a bad day. 3 events with identical recovery timelines looks like a mechanism. If you're already tracking, if you've got a diagnosis and you're monitoring your blood sugar, the thing I'd watch for is the multi-day tail after a sugar event, not just the immediate spike. Your GP is probably tracking your HbA1c, which averages across 3 months. That won't show this pattern. Your own log might if you're noting energy, sleep quality, and hunger alongside the biomarker readings. Not every dip after a meal turns into a 6-day recovery pattern. But if you notice the same shape repeating, disrupted sleep night 1, fog days 2 through 4, back to normal day 6, that's a pattern worth bringing to your GP. Not because it's alarming, because patterns are information. If you're not tracking yet, if you're just noticing that afternoons feel harder than they should, or that your energy is unpredictable without an obvious reason, this is the thing to be curious about. The blood sugar crash most people experience isn't unique to any particular condition or diagnosis. It's a mechanism. Glucose rising fast after a meal, dropping fast 2 hours later, and your body scrambling to stabilise. That sequence starts happening years before anyone gives it a name, before the HbA1c gets flagged, before the GP mentions pre-diabetes. The roller coaster is already running. And the thing is, this pattern in my blood test isn't particular to my situation. Insulin responding this way to sugar, to sleep disruption, to the wrong food at the wrong time. That's a mechanism, not a diagnosis, and it tends to start showing up in the data long before anyone calls it anything. If your energy's been off after meals for no obvious reason, not ill, not stressed, just not right, around 3 o'clock, that's worth tracking. Not a diagnosis, just something to be curious about. If you want to start tracking your own patterns, not the clinical numbers, just the everyday stuff, energy, sleep quality, hunger timings, what you ate 2 hours before the crash, there's a simple tracker template in the description. It's what I used, adapted for everyday use rather than the obsessive version I run. Links in the description. This is educational content only. It is not medical advice. Please speak to your GP before changing your fasting pattern, diet or medication. Next Monday, a different pattern, same detective process.